U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley is calling for all levels of government to adopt new policies and reforms. The Massachusetts Democrat introduced a resolution in the House to condemn police brutality and racial profiling, and she joins us now from Boston. Congresswoman, good morning. It's been very interesting in the aftermath of George Floyd's death to see people on both sides of the political aisle say they condemn the killing, but then they're not very specific about what needs to happen next. You are being specific. So what is your vision for police reform?
Well, first, let me be clear and say the reason why I think it's important that a congressional resolution is brought to the floor and voted on is because congressional intent is a powerful tool. And we are in the Democratic majority. We have the most diverse and representative Congress in the history of Congress, and we should act like it. And in this moment, Congress must function as the conscience for our nation. And that is why I've introduced a resolution in partnership with the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Karen Bass, and Representative Omar, denouncing police brutality, racial profiling, and excessive force. We use congressional resolutions to set a values frame when it comes to foreign policy. The last time a resolution like this was introduced was in 1999 by Representative Danny Davis. It never made it to the floor, and I cannot begin to approximate the number of Black lives that have been lynched, brutalized, murdered, surveyed, profiled from 1999 to now. There is unrest everywhere, and it will persist for as long as there is unrest. And so this congressional resolution at this tipping point moment is an important affirmation. And then we have many bills in the queue that the Congressional Black Caucus will be rolling out that get us to those broader reforms.
Do you think, Congresswoman, that there is agreement on this idea of a tipping point? It's been interesting to hear the president's national security advisor say there is not racism in policing in this country. I talked to the chief of the NYPD here in New York City. He does not believe there is a systemic problem. Is that just a difference in vocabulary or a fundamental difference in vision?
It's a fundamental difference in many things, and I really don't have much patience for or care what Donald Trump and anyone a part of his corrupt administration who codifies their cruelty and their bigotry in policy every day. Depending on the moment, Donald Trump has been either a hapless bystander or an inciter of violence. Someone who refers to my community as the Blacks is not anyone who I am listening to at this moment. He is completely calloused, disconnected, and removed from the hurt and the trauma, the generational hurt and trauma. As a Black woman married to a Black man, raising a Black child, I would very much like to pass on to my 11-year-old daughter something other than generational trauma. And to be clear, the unrest that is happening, the peaceful protesting and demonstrating, is not only about police brutality. Bear in mind the Black community is disproportionately bore the brunt of COVID-19. We are managing that trauma and that loss, a pandemic within a pandemic, a public health pandemic, and the scourge that is police brutality, layered with the trauma of housing injustice, economic injustice, education injustice, and healthcare injustice. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And as a nation, we must face our failure in this moment. We have legislated hate and hurt. It has disproportionately been put on Black folks, and we must now legislate healing and justice.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about healing, it tends to imply some sort of a coming together. When you think about the nation as a whole, how do we come together when it seems there are so many different stories about what America is right now? There's a story that you're telling, and then there are the voters for the president, for many of your opponents on the other side of the aisle in Congress, and they don't recognize the America that you're describing. So how do you bridge that divide? Because the only way you're going to get anything passed, of course, is if everybody votes as a majority.
But that's why what is happening, the organizing, and to be clear, community organizers, the people that I was with in community at our Black Lives Matter local protest last night, community organizers are community builders, not destroyers. The only thing we seek to destroy or dismantle is structural racism and systemic oppression. And so public pressure is important. It holds us accountable. The reason why we have often acted with conviction as lawmakers is because of the courage of everyday people. The civil rights movement, we're still in it. It's not over. But early freedom writers like John Lewis, who I have the honor of serving with, they gave us the blueprint: organize, mobilize, legislate. Now, I won't pretend that it's hard to be encouraged given this GOP-led Senate, which just yesterday was voting on lifetime appointments, another Trump lifetime appointment, instead of bringing real relief to the American people in the midst of the pandemic and passing the HEROES Act, instead of acknowledging the scourge that is police brutality and racism. But Congress, this is an august body and institution, one that I've been connected with for 20 plus years. I'm new to Congress as a member, but I've been associated with this body for decades as an intern, as an aide, and I have tremendous respect for this body and my colleagues. We have denounced evil many times before, and we should do it now.
So, Congresswoman, given that we're in a situation nationally where roughly half the population probably doesn't agree with you, could be more than half the population, how hopeful are you that change will come in the wake of George Floyd's killing and be lasting?
Change comes when we organize for it, when we mobilize for it, and when we demand it. And, you know, so far as you're wondering how many people agree with me, when I'm in community, we were with thousands of people yesterday from every walk of life. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the youth leadership that we continue to see on the front lines of this movement. This movement will not be co-opted. We will be sustained. We will be vigilant. And we will be precise in our demands, because the legislation that has been put upon Black folks codifying hurt and trauma for generations was very precise and very targeted. So in this moment, we too must be precise. We must be focused. And so I am very hopeful.
All right. We can end on a hopeful note then, at least for a moment anyway. Representative Pressley, I appreciate your time this morning. And
I believe in the people.
Hope you have... Thank you very much, Congresswoman.